Hello, everybody. It's me, Fee, or Fiona Timms, otherwise known as White Zulu, author of my autobiography of the same name. And I welcome you all to another chapter of my book. I do hope you're all enjoying my life story, and I must thank all of you for being such dedicated subscribers, especially those who have written such complimentary comments below my videos. They are much appreciated. I would like to point out that the previous South African flag hanging on the wall behind me is not a political statement. It is simply a piece of history in the background of my first 50 years of my life, being born and growing up in my beloved mother country, South Africa. My autobiography, White Zulu, is not a political commentary, and frankly describes my experiences of growing up with the Zulu tribe as my family. That flag is simply a piece of cloth signifying the history of South Africa. It was originally used by the Union of South Africa from 1928 to 1961, and later the Republic of South Africa until 1994. We usually left after about half an hour and had to write our names in the naughty book back at our residence, as we came in well after our curfew had expired. The next morning we were called to see the lady warden, as usual, to explain ourselves. We conferred beforehand and pulled out one of our stock lies. Our favourite was the broken fan belt story. Our car broke down in the middle of town. It was a fan belt problem, and we had to wait for a tow truck to take us to an all-night garage, which would then replace the broken part, and of course this all took hours. Earnestly we corroborated each other's versions of this fib, boldly looking the lady warden in the eye with our own innocent wide eyes. You could have used a stocking, you know. If you tie a simple nylon stocking or two together, you can improvise a fan belt and we'll get you home, she told us, not for the first time. Oh, but we never wear stockings when we go out in the evenings. We only ever wear them to college. Another lie. We exclaimed each time, apparently shocked at the very idea. Exasperated because she couldn't find enough of a loophole in our stories to convict us. Although she became more and more suspicious as fan belts on our escorts' cars seemed to break so regularly, and at the drop of a hat, she snapped, well, if you're late again, I'll have to gate you. Consider yourself warned. And we'd have to dredge up another excuse the next time. Most extraordinarily, we never took any drugs. During my year in residence at Nora House, I never even once came across drugs of any sort, even dagga, which grows prolifically all over Natal and Zululand, as everyone knows, in fact, all over South Africa. Known internationally as Durban poison, it's much sought after by smugglers as it sells for huge profits on the streets of London and New York. Although some surfers were reputed to be dedicated dagga smokers, we never ever saw them use it or any other drugs, nor were we offered any. We drank a bit most evenings, a fair bit, but our dates weren't flush enough to lash out and buy spirits, and so we stuck to lager or wine. I'd learned my lesson early on with gin and abandoned it in favour of less potent stuff. Not everybody went to the same venues. and somehow I'd managed to acquire 3 different boyfriends, 2 of whom were called Anthony. Each guy seemed to think I was his exclusive girl, and I had great fun juggling them, trying to ensure that they didn't meet and compare notes. I had some close calls, but since I liked them all equally, and there seemed to be plenty more to choose from, I didn't care too much if some of them fell by the wayside. One of the Antonys had an aunt who lived in a big house on the Berea. She had about 2 acres of lush terraced garden in front of our house, overlooking the bay, filled with banana palms, lychee trees, avocado and mango trees, dark maroon croton plants with their huge leaves frilled with green, and green and white, filled the borders, and tall prehistoric tree ferns grew everywhere. On really steamy, humid evenings, he'd arrive at Nora House in his jalopy. Go and get changed into your cozies, he'd announce to any of us who were at a loose end, hanging around the res, trying to find some respite from the relentless, stifling heat. We put our clothes on over our bikinis, and he drove us up to his aunt's house in his battered old Citroen, his surfboard tied to the roof rack. There were usually about 6 of us, clutching bottles of cheap red wine called Tassenberg, Tassies, which we could buy by the 2-litre bottle for a couple of rand from bottle stores on the Berea that stayed open late, and from which we took large swigs, nicely mellow. We'd cram ourselves somehow into the sagging and cracked leather seats. Anthony parked in the road at the bottom of his aunt's garden, and we all climbed quietly over the termite-riddled wooden fence. There was a swimming pool on the lower terrace, and a tarmac tennis court had been built on the level above. We took off our clothes and slipped silently into the silky, lukewarm water. We swam around in the big, pristine pool, trying not to splash. It was underwater lit, which made it even more special. "Shush! Don't laugh so loudly," said Anthony. "Even if she's a bit deaf, the old bat will hear us and call the cops." We floated on our backs, looking up at the night sky. Stars in the southern hemisphere really do blaze. It looked as though someone had scattered millions of brilliant cut, sparkling diamonds haphazardly over black velvet to lie there glittering as the Milky Way. Bigger stars, like the ones that form the Southern Cross, twinkled brightly, glinting off the glassy surface of the rippling water. Now and again a shooting star plummeted down from the heavens in an arc, the meteorite darting as suddenly as if an invisible string, pulled by a giant hand, had jerked it out of the black sky, and making one of us gasp and call out softly, "Look, a shooting star, make a wish, everybody, quick." I couldn't think of anything to wish for. I already had everything I could possibly want. My world was perfect. One weekend, my friends and I decided to go camping on the Zululand north coast. Somebody had a Volkswagen Kombi, you know, the sort of minibus. And someone else had managed to borrow 2 tents. There were 8 of us, 4 guys and 4 girls. And we set off merrily that Friday afternoon, crossing the Tugela River. We drove into Zululand and up to Richards Bay, about an hour and a half's drive from Durban, and just this side of Lake St. Lucia, a popular holiday beach and fishing resort in Zululand. We stopped to buy some food at a supermarket there and packed the big cool boxes we'd bought with dozens of cans of chilled Castle lager, purchased from the St. Lucia bottle store, along with several 2-litre bottles of Tassie's cheap red wine. In those days, Richards Bay was a pristine estuary, and the village consisted of nothing but an old wood and iron, spooky-looking hotel on the hill overlooking the bay, a few thatched beach cottages scattered here and there, and a ramshackle boathouse perched precariously on rotting wooden stilts on the shoreline. We could see several pods of hippos lazing in the brackish water, and as soon as they noticed us parked on the bank, the bulls yawned widely as a warning, revealing sharp, pale yellow tusks embedded in their vast pink mouths. They grunted, flicked water droplets off their tiny little ears, and sank below the surface of the water, leaving nothing but a few ripples. There were plenty of crocodiles too, sunning themselves on sandbars along the water's edge, and water birds and waders, such as black and white avocets, black-winged stilts, and blacksmith plovers pecked for insects and mollusks along reeds on the mudflats along the shoreline. It was an idyllic place. There's a perfect campsite right near the water, said Anthony, and he swung the laden combi round to park facing the bay. He was right. We would be sheltered from behind by a semicircle of beautifully gnarled and twisted Natal fig trees, interspersed with fever trees, with their curious yellowish-green bark, providing a modicum of shade from the baking midday sun. Let's not put up our tents until later. I'm too hot and tired now, and it'll just be a fag. We can do it after sunset when it's cooler, suggested Angie. And so we settled ourselves comfortably on blankets spread over the short, hippo-grazed grass in the dappled shade, to crack open our lagers and eat the lunch we'd brought. Much later, as the sun sank behind the trees, we started on the Tassies and lit a fire under the portable braai that Anthony had borrowed from his dad. No scottles in those days. I think this was like a disc of a farm implement. Kind of rusty. We grilled the lamb chops and boerewors that we'd brought with us, eating them in hamburger buns, as nobody had thought to bring plates or cutlery. After supper, we settled back on our rugs to relax and drink more tassies. The rest of the evening was a bit of a blur, and I vaguely recall that some of us made a token but fruitless attempt to try and erect the tents. We gave up eventually and fell asleep, or, more accurately, passed out on the rugs, oblivious to the swarms of malaria-carrying mosquitoes that feasted on us all night. We were rudely awoken at first light by the alarm call of 2 guala-gualas, that wonderful onomatopoeic name, Zulu name, for purple-crested lories, perched on the lower branches of the trees overhead. These birds had been startled by a troop of vervet monkeys who'd been silently and systematically raiding our camp since daybreak. We opened our eyes blearily, just in time to see the last monkey running up a tree, carrying in his mouth the final remaining packet of cereal. "The little bastards have taken everything," said Anthony, after scratching through our camping equipment. "All our chilled cartons of liquid fruit juice and even our toothpaste. Apparently they liked that sweet, minty taste, and after dashing up a tree with them, they gnawed the tubes open to lick out the paste. There isn't a scrap of food left," said Jackie with a wail, "and we hadn't thought to bring any fresh water or soft drinks of any description other than the liquid fruit. To cap everything, we were all suffering from monumental hangovers and had parched mouths and thumping headaches. The sun had already been sizzling down on us as we slept, since it had risen over the estuary a couple of hours ago, and now our heads throbbed painfully. The water in the lagoon will be too salty for us to drink, and it's going to be too risky anyway to take a container down to the water's edge to fill with enough even to splash on our faces," I said, as we all knew there were crocs lying hidden in the reeds. While we were still comatose, a big boulder crocodile, about 4 meters long, had walked up the sloping bank and settled himself only a yard or so from the edge of our blankets, lying there looking exactly like an innocuous dried log that might have been washed up by the tide. As soon as he came to and realized it was there, Bruce said, "Shit, look at the bloody croc." "Where?" groaned Anthony blearily. "Right there," yelled Bruce, and pointed past me to the log next to our rug. Anthony muttered a very rude word under his breath as he grabbed my hand to yank me up, and we scrambled hastily and unsteadily to our feet, dragging the wreckage of our picnic and blankets to the shade and comparative safety of the trees. "Jeepers, that was close," I said, after we'd regained our breath and had started to hurl various missiles, such as our tackies and empty Tassie's bottles at the croc to try and get it to move back into the water. In spite of its log-like appearance, it could have charged forward with ease and snapped up any one of us, causing serious injury. But all it did was lower its belly heavily to grass level, turn around and waddle slowly back to the water's edge. It flailed its tail from side to side and then moved forward into the water to sink silently into the murky depths, leaving hardly a ripple to show there had been a monster croc visible a moment ago. As the day progressed and the sun became hotter and hotter, we had no option but to open the remaining bottles of Tassie's to quench our thirst. And later that afternoon, after we'd woken up yet again, befuddled and dishevelled, Angie said, "I'm sick of this. I'm thirsty and hot and I'm dying for a swim, but I can't because of the crocs. My head aches and my mouth feels awful. Let's go home, guys." There was no argument there. So we threw all our stuff into the combi and drove along the shoreline till we met up with the sandy track that took us back to the main national road and a filling station where we could buy litres of cold Coke and lots of aspirin to get ourselves back to Durban. That's all for this afternoon. More next time. about my wayward life back when I was 19 in Durban, supposed to be studying, doing nothing of the sort, but having an enormous amount of fun. So thank you for listening, and thank you too for John Moslane Budgie, my friend, for being my sound engineer. Goodbye. That is all for the time being, and there's more to come next week. I would like to thank John Moslane for putting aside his Friday afternoons to help me produce these videos. Without him, I could not do this. I would also like to thank Sean van Vuren for his sterling work in uploading my videos to my YouTube channel, adding the photos, as well as managing my channel so professionally. If you would like to know more about my other works, I have written 5 books in all, and each one is autobiographical. Please visit my website at www.whitezulubook.com, where you will find a lot more information as well as plenty of photographs. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed my life story, and there is plenty more to come. A thumbnail photo will be attached each week, and thank you so much for all your support and all the very kind remarks you make in complimenting me on my work. I really appreciate it. Goodbye.